Okay, my placement is at the Centre Against Sexual Assault Northern Region. We're a part of a larger group called CASA Forum, which is an agency that represents sexual assault services around Victoria. CASAs came out of a group in the 80s called WAR, which stood for Women Against Rape, which was a needs-based advocacy group which ended up developing a service which was able to help women who had been in situations of sexual assault. The needs base came from the fact that there were actually hospitals at the time that were turning away women who had reported instances of sexual assault. Very clearly there was a societal issue around sexual assault, and WAR was a group that was made to aim at fixing this. So in a CASA, mainly you will have the services there for people who have been victims of sexual assault. We call them victim survivors, and then non-offending partners and family members or friends. However, there are also there's a thing called the Sexually Abusive Behaviours Treatment Service, which runs in southeastern CASA and I think a few other CASAs, which is actually aimed at helping people with sexually abusive behaviours so they are actually perpetrators. CASAs recognise sexual assault as a form of gender-based violence, which has an unusual disparity towards violence against women and children. That does not mean that men do not witness or suffer from sexual assault circumstances. It means that the large proportion of sexual assault will be perpetrated by a male towards women or children or LGBTIQ communities. CASAs also recognise that it is a community issue. It is an issue that is societally reinforced, and there are power and critical dynamics that are at play that reinforce behaviours and attitudes that help precipitate sexual abusive behaviours. So inside Northern CASA, the main work that is done is that of the counsellor advocates. Pretty self-explanatory term. They counsel victim survivors, but they also work on an advocacy level both independently with the clients and towards CASA Forum. There is quite a bit of restraint on CAs, which is what we call counsellor advocates, to do their job and advocate effectively for their clients. This is due to the fact that there is a lack of funding in the mental health area. The waiting list for counsellor advocates, or the waiting list for victim survivors, is at 4 months currently right now, so there's a huge demand with a lack of services provided. That being said as well, if there's any kind of advocacy that has to happen bottom up, it goes to the managers, then to CASA Forum, who will have a dialogue with state, federal politicians, and other agencies. So my placement job is a research placement aimed at developing a resource for boys and young men, which we identified as being 12 to 25. There's a resource available for women, which is all around validating, informing, educating, and providing information around how to deal with an instance of sexual assault, how to help a friend, the legal implications, etc. The reason why I was brought in with another student as two males was there was a lack of a resource for males, and I think the statistics are there is 1 in 6 men are sexually assaulted as opposed to 1 in 3, I think it is, for women. Our service at Northern CASA has a high proportion of women but also some men, and the supervisor I have has asked for us to help identify a way to make a resource that's going to help young men and boys validate their stories, share information, help seek, and try to find a way that we can engage people into accessing help eventually in the end. The difficulty that comes alongside that is there's issues of masculinity, or toxic masculinity rather, sexuality, homophobia. There's a lot more done with women in the sexual assault field together, whereas men are quite isolated and they can't, or at least are unable to find a way to share their stories and information, and they are not empowered to help seek as well. So we're dealing with a situation where there's probably a higher rate of sexual assault with men than we actually know about. And given that there is that probability, there's a resource that we've identified that needs to be there. The research that we've had around how men help seek, how men try to maneuver help when it comes to an instance of sexual assault, is that they're very private. They will not talk to other people about it. They will not talk to their friends or family. They much prefer to do things privately and independently. It's consistent with a lot of other health-based research around men, and we identified an online resource as being a main method to helping men take that first step to help seeking. What that's going to look like, we don't know. We're currently conducting focus groups with young men from schools. We'll be doing focus groups with people who are taking part in the service. We'd also be doing focus groups with some older men that may have been able to give us some information around what they would like to know when they were younger. When talking about advocacy for boys and young men, I think it's vitally important that we start portraying messages that boys and young men are not alone, and that sexual assault is more common than they think. Getting through the idea of toxic masculinity and the emotional restraint that men hold generally around letting people know about their feelings and their emotions is a big part of enabling men to help seek. We've, in our focus groups, identified that a lot of young people will like to go online to help seek, and we've also identified that audiovisual equipment material is like videos, images, short little words, stories, pictures. They all are things that are probably going to be the most effective way of getting people to come and learn about other instances of sexual assault and how they may be able to relate their stories to it, is through those methods. Advocacy is not common for young men and boys, not common for men in general around sexual assault. There's not many men that will speak out as champions around sexual assault. It is changing slowly, but I think also that there is a discrepancy in the amount of sexual assaults, means that it's kind of considered not as much of an issue as it is for women who are sexually assaulted at a far higher rate. So later on, I think the start of next week, we'll be taking part in 16 days of activism, which is 16 days of activism around instances of sexual assault, family violence, interpersonal violence, and we stand in solidarity with counsellor advocates, and we'll be showing our heads in and around the Austin lobby, helping people contribute to a larger mural which I guess resembles and represents the fact that sexual assault is a community issue. It's an issue that happens to 1 in 3 women and 1 in 6 men, and it's something that is ill understood and needs more attention, and this is what that's for. We will also be taking part in the Week Without Violence, and we will also be doing some sort of arts design, information dissemination, and involving the schools that we're running in the Respectful Relationships program in helping us create an art piece that's going to represent how NCASA is working with the community, working with people in and around its region to recognise that sexual assault is an issue that is one for everyone to pay attention to, and one that we should all stand up against.